I'm Kelly Mitchell. I am here today with Joe Wagner of Copper Cane Wine and Provisions. We are in the beautiful downtown Napa Valley, downtown Napa, in the Fagiani building, which is new to the Joseph Wagner family. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it's a historic building, and it started off its life as a restaurant in the early 1900s. I believe it was built in 1906. It turned into a bar and has a bit of a storied history since then, but it was closed down for a number of decades, and we were fortunate enough to take it over, and we are going to be doing a bar, restaurant, and have a good focus on our wines here. So it's a fun place. It's got a lot of history, just like we do in the wine industry here in Napa. We're happy to be a part of the resurgence of the city of Napa, which for a long time had some difficulties.
Absolutely. Well, this is an exciting time in Napa. And certainly for you as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. It's very exciting.
So you've been through, I mean, okay, we don't want to keep any secrets here. You are from the Caymus family, like the Wagner Caymus family, correct?
That's correct,
okay.
Yeah. My family started actually back in the 1840s here.
Oh my goodness.
And they started growing grapes back then and started getting into the wine industry, and they got out of the wine industry because of a black stain on our society called prohibition. And they got back in 1972 without any other real opportunities for them as farmers. Jumped into wine and started Caymus. It was my grandfather, my grandmother, and my father Chuck, and they started, never looked back, and it's fortunate to become a part of it back in about 2000. So yeah, we have some history here, and wanting this history to continue to go down to the next generation, so on and so forth. And you know, I hope that someday out there they're going to be looking at it and saying, well, 20 generations down the road, we're still happy to be here in Napa Valley making wine. So, and
you're fifth generation, correct?
I'm fifth, yeah.
Okay.
So we got a ways to go.
Yes, you do. Work it. Seriously, this is it's incredible the journey you've been on yourself. I mean, just looking back at we've got Mayo Meat, which sold 2 years ago for $315 million,
yep.
and that kind of, you know, looking at this story, that really got my attention, because this is not what you would call a conventional wine company. Is that accurate?
I'd say it's accurate, yeah. We took a different approach to things. You know, I started with Belgois. That was the first brand that I cut my teeth on, and we launched that with the 2001 vintage. And Pinot Noir wasn't the hot item back then. Nobody really knew what Pinot Noir was or cared about Pinot Noir. And so we had a bit of an uphill battle, and came up with this concept of multiple site sourcing, so multiple vineyards that would make wines that, you know, could be blended together to create consistency and more opulence and richness and a broader flavor profile. And that was the dawn of Mayo Meat. And it was really a by the glass wine, and it did just that for the first nearly decade of its life. And it got to a point where it started getting picked up by retail stores and whatnot, and the growth on it was phenomenal. And we're a small family-owned and operated company, and when you have growth like that, being able to grow into it without having the infrastructure in place, you know, it was flying by the seat of your pants to a degree, and it was a blast. It was a great time. Learned a lot at the same time. Had you know, probably a few more gray hairs because of it, but the visibility of the brand and the value of the brand from the bigger companies out there, you know, they started to knock on the door, and they came up with, continually said no for a number of years. And finally they came up with a number that it was really hard to not look at, and we ended up going down that route, and it gave us an opportunity to stay at the size we were from an infrastructure standpoint, and be able to focus on what we've always known how to do, which is, you know, more of the boutique side of winemaking, grape growing, and put that investment back into the ground, back into vineyard land, and also facilities and places like here at Fagiani's to showcase the wines. So it was a huge opportunity, and we're trying to make right with every bit of that sale.
Love it. So looking back a little bit on key influences in your life, can you share with us who they were and what kinds of things that they really kind of instilled within you that are part of the makeup of you and your business today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say one of the biggest influences in my life, in my earlier life, was my grandmother on my mom's side. Her name is Annie, and I went to work with her. She cleaned classrooms every day, and so after school I'd go clean with her for $2 a day, and did that for all my elementary school years, and I think learned a very good work ethic from her. And then when we were at her house, she'd always have me gardening. So I feel like that was a really good, rounded sort of upbringing with her, while my parents were both working at the time. And then as I progressed and grew and got into more of kind of a career age, my dad became a huge influence to me. Kind of always pushing me along, but never demanding of me that I get into the wine industry, but would say, hey, take the rule book and throw it out the window, try new things, you'll make mistakes, but you're going to learn a lot out of it. And would always support me in those endeavors, and I could always go back to him and ask him, hey, I'm thinking about doing this experiment, and he'd probably say something like, oh, I did that back in '78. It didn't work, but go ahead and give it a shot. So, that's
a great way for him to lead.
Yeah,
right?
And so I learned a lot from that process and working with him. So from, I think work ethic and kind of just getting to know winemaking and throwing that rule book to the wind and trying new things. My grandparents and my dad were major influences. Yeah.
Beautiful. So from the standpoint of, you're definitely a through and through entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs are known to make great, fantastic mistakes. Can you share with us one of your most spectacular mistakes that you made that you think gave you enough lessons to push on and really create some of the brands that you've created?
Yeah, so it was a mistake, but it turned positive. So
that's the best kind.
So we were, as a small Pinot Noir maker with bell gloss, everything was done in half-ton bins or three-quarter-ton bins, very small fermentation lots, hand punched down the whole bit. And so with that, you don't have any temperature controls, which to slow your fermentation down, you want to control your temperature.
Oh, yeah.
And so our method of controlling temperature, which is common in the wine industry, is using dry ice if you don't have, say, a glycol system or something of that sort.
Right.
So we'd have these heat spikes where fermentations would get out of control, the temperatures would skyrocket, and they'd be burning through your sugars at a very rapid rate, so you don't get that opulence that you're looking for in the red wines. And so we'd get back in the morning, this is over a period of, say, 4 hours, and we want our fermentations to be in the 70-degree range, and they'd pop up to 90, so we put a bunch of dry ice in there. And those wines always turned out to be phenomenal.
Wow.
So for years, and this took, 3 or 4 years at least, so I always thought it was the heat spike. So here we are now progressing into tanks and having a glycol system and a jacket to control temperature. And so we're trying to emulate this heat spike scenario, but we didn't use dry ice. So then it dawned on me, what was the one thing we couldn't make the wines that we were accidentally making at that time? It dawned on me, we were using dry ice. And so we started trying dry ice out and realized that what we now call cryo extraction, or the freezing of the cell walls and the skin, led to greater color extraction, greater phenolic or mouthfeel characters that you can get in the wines, and just a more expressive wine in general. So that was a mistake. It took a few years to figure out the benefits of it or how it actually worked. But I'd say that if I were to pick one, that was that was a good one.
Beautiful. What an excellent mistake to make. So what was the first wine to benefit from that grand mistake? The actualization and the implementation of the new practice.
That would be any of the bell gloss wines at the time. So just that was a way that we were making the wines, and I started off at a smaller base, and then wanted to make sure that the wines were stable and that they would age right and whatnot. And then we adopted it as part of our standard for winemaking, and we've used it ever since. And it moved over from the Pinot Noir side only to pretty much all the reds that we now produce. And it's a benefit. It creates these wines with this very dense weight on them, really a mouth-filling character, but not a drying tannin that you typically get from over-extracting when you're trying to get that character. So it creates this nice little balance between your structural elements and the drying structural elements of the wine.
And it might be a little bit more drinking friendly, is that accurate?
I think that's absolutely what it was, yeah.
When you look at your market for the brands that you're developing, who do you have a profile of an individual that you look at, or who you're catering to?
you know, we've kind of always adopted the philosophy of go with your palate. And I grew up with, I think, an American diet, a pretty standard American diet. And so, you know, I joke that, you know, we all had Raisin Bran, we all had Eggo waffles, we've all had Coca-Cola. And I think that my palate is reflective of that. And I think that a lot of people out there are looking for wines that are not score-oriented, that are not kind of, you know, the elitist snobbery approach either. And they're looking for something that appeals to their palate, but also reflects kind of the true characters of where the grapes were grown. And so that's where I think I was able to find a middle ground in trying to convey that. So at the end of the day, it came down to not what I felt was, you know, the best thing to do from a traditional standpoint, where a lot of people in the wine industry adopt the old world as their standard of winemaking,
right? But
more about what can we do in the vineyard or what can we do in the winery that will create a wine that ultimately I personally enjoy, the team personally enjoys more, and assumingly the consumers out there in you know, the U.S. or North America for that matter will enjoy more as well.
Love it. If you had to look at a couple of key ingredients as you were getting Belle Gloss off the ground, what kind of marketing magic did you work to get that to take hold?
You know, the launch of Mayo Meat for By the Glass got us a lot of exposure in the restaurant world, and that was a great thing, where it was, you know, grassroots effort in a way, trying to get people exposed to what California Pinot Noir at its best could be. And so that was an approach that we took then that we still have to this day with our kind of tiered system of wines that are dedicated to be by the glass, that are meant to, you know, elevate your everyday life. You go to a restaurant, you have great food, great service, great ambiance, great company. You just need great wine added on top to make it that much better. So that was our simple philosophy, and we've kept with that. And so I'd say that this day that's still kind of our biggest, you know, dollar spend in marketing is that we have some incentivized price or a lower price if somebody's pouring it by the glass, and that's something we believe in a big way, and that's something that gets a great level of exposure. Given that the wines are, you know, true to what we're trying to do, I think that's the right way to do it.
Excellent. So, what were you? I kind of want to look at two stages of your life career-wise. I mean, I want to look at the first wine that you produced and what the vision was there, and then where you're at now and what the vision is. Okay. And how does that differ, and where did it come from?
So I started first with just learning the basics of winemaking, making Cabernet at Caymus, and then started playing around with this.
Now, most of us would not call that the basics of winemaking.
It was a good, very good, solid foundation
Seriously.
of basics. And started playing around with Pinot Noir, and so Belle Gloss is kind of, you know, where I started. So this is the first of it, and I felt that what we're trying to achieve with these still to this day was conveying the vineyards, and in the vineyards the most important factors being your soil and your climate. Right. Secondary factors being farming practices, your clonal selection, your trellising. Those all have a contributing factor to the character and the grapes and therefore the wine. But it really comes down to, you know, say 90% of it is your soil and your climate. So we took the approach of, we have these 3 vineyard sites that are evolved into 3 different vineyard sites, each with about 150 miles between them. So one in Santa Barbara County, Santa Maria Valley, one in the Santa Lucia Highlands of Monterey, and then one in now Russian River Valley, Sonoma. So just about similar proximity to the ocean, to the Pacific, so they have that cooling effect that allows Pinot Noir to develop slowly on the vine, which is, I think, an integral part of creating quality Pinot Noir. And then being able to make the wines under one hand or one sort of philosophy, so that you truly get the character that Mother Nature gave you based on soil, climate, and then again secondarily some of the other aspects. So that's where we started, and we still have that same philosophy with Belle Gloss. We've taken that philosophy to a few other of the new wines that we've created, and I'd say the unique thing about Pinot Noir is Pinot seems to thrive more on having a singular source than any other varietal. It can transcend the site or the vineyard more than any varietal. When it comes to Cabernet, the philosophy that I've always had, and it's a shared philosophy with my family, is that it takes a number of different vineyard sites and a broader range of where your fruit source is from to create a kind of a world-class blend of Cabernet. And so that was the approach we took with our new launch of what we call the Napa Valley Quilt. And that's this right here, just kind of took an aerial imagery here of what vineyards look like from the air, and taking the patchwork of Napa Valley and putting it into one kind of cohesive blend that we're calling the Quilt.
So you're taking the best of the best, ideally, right?
In a way, and
Yeah.
you have vintage variation, and that's what we're really trying to curb to a degree. So from sourcing as far south as say Coombsville area or the mountain regions of Atlas Peak to as far north as Calistoga, you have about a 30-mile spread, and you have a huge temperature variation. So in hot years, your southern regions like Coombsville and Atlas Peak are going to thrive. In cooler years, Calistoga is going to be phenomenal. And then we have areas in between like Oakville and St. Helena, and then mountain fruit is a whole thing into its own. So being able to source and take fruit from these different sites and blend them together for kind of a consistent style is our intention with Quilt. And to do that, we need to have that range of sourcing so that we can maintain consistency vintage to vintage, and also have a broader character in the wine that really exemplifies what Napa Valley Cabernet is known for.
Excellent. Now with Quilt's your first Cabernet.
It is,
which is really exciting. Were there any fears going into this, or any intimidation? I mean, you're pretty well seasoned.
I've done Cabernet for quite a few years, but never under my own label. So I felt very confident in all that experience coming together for our first release of Quilt for Copper Cane. So I felt very confident in it. Really felt like we were finally able to put all of my learnings in my short time on this earth to the test.
Love it, love it. Okay, so vision for the future. Now it seems like we started with, families that were winemakers and farmers, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. We've gone from, boutique wineries to big conglomerates purchasing a lot of family properties and things like that. We're also seeing this influx of people coming in that don't have any roots really here. They're making their own wine, they're using other facilities, they're buying grapes from wherever. What do you think that landscape is going to translate into? Is it going to be a lot of boutiques and then the big guys, or what does that look like to you?
I think Napa is a great place to start with. I mean, you're looking at a very evolved and very mature wine industry in comparison to other appellations in California. So if you look at that and where we're at right now, you nailed it. We have fewer and fewer family farmers that have been here for generations. We have, of course, the corporate interests, the publicly traded companies, larger companies that are always out there looking for land and making wine, but they're a little more bottom line focused. And then you have a more rare or newer group of people coming in that maybe they made their money elsewhere and they want to have a piece of this piece of Eden, so to speak. It's a beautiful area to live, and the lifestyle around the wine industry is a wonderful one. It's about food, wine, sharing, and who doesn't want to do that? And wine country is typically a great place to spend your time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I understand the draw, and so what that's done is I think it's kept Napa Valley as the most competitive place in the U.S., if not the world, for winemaking. This ability to have almost unlimited funds to create your 100-point wine. That's a big thing, where you hire the best vineyard manager, the best winemaker, you put in the top-notch facility, et cetera, et cetera. So you're stacking the cards to a very quickly progressing wine industry. So for everyone to keep up, you need to continue to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, kind of continue pushing yourself, trying new things, and keep that experimentation up. And it's that old saying of like evolve or dissolve, and so we need to continually evolve, as I think everybody in the industry does. And I think if anything, it pushes the envelope for the consumer out there to get more consistency and better wines more regularly, because all of that information, all of that experimentation eventually translates to the industry as a whole. When you have Napa, the only negative to Napa is that land prices have skyrocketed, and that's your base for your cost of goods, right? So you end up elevating that, and so what that's going to look like out in the world of purchasing wine is high wine prices. Absolutely. And trying to keep those down to a level that brings people in that are curious, that want to try it. It makes it difficult in Napa Valley, or to make a Napa Valley wine that has that ability. So consumers will start looking elsewhere. They'll maybe go to Paso Robles or Lodi and find something that's really good, but not quite Napa Valley, but at a quarter of the cost or less.
Is that part of the reason for looking for grapes elsewhere as well, is maybe to control costs so you can appeal to the great American palate?
Not so much on the cab side. I think
right.
Cabernet is king here in Napa, and that's not the only place we want to focus. But from I wouldn't say it's from a pricing standpoint for us. It's more about trying to convey the characters of the areas. Say with Pinot Noir, what the characters are of Russian River Valley versus Santa Lucia Highlands. But I know that with Quilt, our effort is to try to create a wine that conveys Napa Valley at a high level at a relatively reasonable price. So that's been a big focus for us with Quilt.
And Quilt this is the first year it's being released, correct?
Yeah, it's just released maybe 3 months ago.
Excellent. Yeah. So people can buy that online. Go to Coppercane Wines.
Coppercane.com, and but you can also find it some of the local restaurants. I mean, we've been doing a pretty good job with the restaurant world out there. So
excellent.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Do you have a favorite wine or a preferred grape or berry?
I've got to say it's still Pinot Noir.
It's almost like kids, right? It's hard to choose. But Pinot Noir,
it's just starting with Pinot Noir and and learning so much about it, and it was this wild grape. I mean, it's very difficult to manage from a vineyard standpoint and a winemaking standpoint. It just gets squirrely on you and wants to go all different ways. So you're constantly kind of getting it back in line. Whereas you got Cabernet or Zinfandel, they're almost like driving a Cadillac. It's just those cushy suspension, whatever else. It just kind of continues to lumber along, and may kind of go off course a little bit, but you just slightly move it and it gets back on course. So it's they're two very different wines from both the growing standpoint and the winemaking. Both very enjoyable, but my heart is set on the taming of Pinot Noir, I think.
I love it. I love it. That's a full-time job and a half, right? I'd love for you to speak, if you would, for just a moment to the future winemakers of America, and maybe give them some tips and advice on what they might do in their lives, or what things they should be kind of forward-thinking, looking at.
Yeah. I'd say always stay true to yourself and your palate. What you think tastes good probably will be adopted by someone else. And don't worry about the traditional methods of winemaking. I do believe that progress is what will always be a mainstay of the wine industry, whether it's new adaptations of trellising in the vineyard or new winemaking protocols or standards. I think those are the things that continue to push us along and create better wines. And throwing that old rule book to the wind, throwing tradition to the wind, try new things, you're going to create better wines that way, and you may just find a perfect niche that somebody else loves just as much, and you may have an amazing brand on your hands.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Likewise. That's a wrap. Cut and print.